Well, good morning, everybody. Good to see you. If we haven't met, my name's Matt. Welcome to Lewisville. So just to start off, I realized something this week. I feel like every month that goes that we've been living here, I'm becoming a little bit more East Coast every month and a little bit more hick every month that I'm here. Let me explain. First, on the East Coast side, our family, we went and walked through those sugar bush places up Gorge Road yesterday. You guys know, I don't remember the name. Trites, I think, is the one at the very end that you can get pancakes and stuff, but there's different ones. We didn't realize there's different ones, so we bought at the first place, only to realize if you walk a bit further, you get more for your buck. Kind of lost out on that. But we had a great time. It was like yesterday was the perfect day for that kind of stuff if you were out and enjoying it. And we got there at just the right time where this one family was drilling holes and putting taps into all the trees and then hooking on the buckets so we could see it. So we had a really good chat with them about how it all works. And if you know my wife, Bobby, like that sparked it in her. And so later that afternoon, she went and bought buckets and taps. So stay tuned for more stories about the Vincent adventures and making our own maple syrup to maybe save 50 cents. So I'm not sure how that would go. On the Hick side, here's something. This week, our septic system stopped working, and I figured out how to fix it. I dug it up with the help of a gentleman on the line. If you had told me 2 years ago you're going to be living in a place called Irish Town and you're going to have clogged toilets one day and you're going to figure out how to deal with that yourself, man, I would have never in my life believed you. But just putting this out there, if you're on septic and you need a hand, I may be your guy. I know how it all kind of works now. The things you never know you're going to need to know until you need them. So, it's been fun. I've been away a little bit, not teaching, and so I'm really glad to be back. Josh kicked us off in this journey towards Easter last week looking at the Transfiguration story. We're trying to look at different snapshots to prepare ourselves for the Easter weekend, for Good Friday and Easter Sunday, looking at different texts that kind of get our minds and our hearts prepared. And so if you have your Bibles or you want to open an app, John chapter 13 is the story we're looking at today. And we'll be reading that through together, and as our usual pattern, I'll share a few things that stand out to me, and then we will, as long as my time management is on track, have a chance just to listen a little bit and to have a bit of a conversation. So John chapter 13, I'm going to read this for us, verses 1 to 17, and then we'll dig in here. This is what it says. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Depending on the translation you may have in front of you, it may also say he showed the full extent of his love. Verse 2, the evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Then Lord, Simon Peter replied, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. Jesus answered, those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him, and that is why he said not every one was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Okay, let's pull a few things out here. First off, I want to just mention, and maybe you caught it as we were reading, but Jesus knew what was about to happen. There's this awareness. In verse 1, it says, Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave the world and go to the Father. In verse 3, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, that he had come from God and was returning to God. So there's this knowledge. Now, this is a lot different than if you're hanging out with friends, watching a movie, and you're watching it all unfold, and you say to them, I think I know where this is going, what's going to happen next. and then the plot happens, and sure enough, it takes place, and you're like, I knew that was going to happen, right? Based on a hunch. This is not that. That idea of knowing that's listed here is an intentional, conscious awareness of what is to come. It's the ability that God gives Jesus in this to know the next steps. All of the elements are coming together in such a time, at such a place, for this unfolding of God's plan. We get a little bit of a foretaste here of a divine timeline that's starting to unfold here. This is a knowledge that only comes and is only available to Jesus in this moment. He knows, he understands, he is aware on a level that no one else is. So I just want you to think and just kind of park that, because this is an understanding that Jesus has that no one else has in the room. Now let's go into the second thing. Oh, actually, let me just mention one thing. Around this idea of knowing, how does Jesus know? What does he know? What's he aware of? Another little taste of this is in Matthew's gospel, where Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. You may remember this part of the story, that right before Jesus is arrested, right before Judas comes and betrays him with the kiss, right in that moment before, while he's with his friends, he's praying because he knows what's coming. And this is what Jesus prays. He says, Matthew 26:39, he says, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." That's another glimpse of this awareness that Jesus knows the unfolding plan, this divine timeline, and what's happening. He knows the steps that are about to take place in a way that no one else does. There's this hint at what's coming. Gary Burge says, Jesus is completely aware of the cost of this life. For already the darkness, driven by the devil, is working its plan through Judas. So first thing, Jesus knew. And then we read that he gets up. So verse 4 to 11, we get this really interesting part of the story where Jesus washes his disciples' feet. So, before I came to Lewisville, when I was 32 years old, I was hired as a lead pastor for the very first time. And I had been a youth pastor, I had been an associate pastor, and now I was in this role as a lead pastor for the very first time, and I was full of energy and excitement. I hope I still have energy and excitement, but way more then. I was full steam ahead. I couldn't wait to get going. And I was part of a denominational family that had roots in Anabaptism, which, if you don't know what that means, if you have never studied church history or the Radical Reformation, all you need to know is that it was these really Jesus-centered folks, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, who took the teaching of Jesus from John 13 literally. They believed that it was important to wash each other's feet. They practiced this on a regular basis as a sign of love and commitment to each other, encouragement, humility. This was one of their ordinances. So as I joined this denomination as a lead pastor for the first time, as I was studying all this history and getting super fired up about it, I had an upcoming elders meeting at our house on a Saturday morning, and I thought, I'm going to wash all the elders' feet when they show up, and it's going to be amazing. So Saturday comes, I have everything ready in the front entrance of our house, water, a basin to pour, fresh towels, and I thought, no one likes to take off their socks and shoes and put back on those socks again. So I had Bobby suggested get brand new socks for everyone, so we had brand new socks for everyone. It was going to be this wonderful time. I had rehearsed in my mind the words of affirmation and encouragement I were going to say, so if someone was going to sit down, I'd wash their feet and I'd encourage them in their leadership, their commitment to the church. I was so excited for it. I'm not an animal. I wasn't going to get between the toes or anything, but I was definitely going to pour some nice warm water and they were going to be encouraged. I was very excited. Doorbell rings, first person arrives. You know when someone slowly becomes aware of what's about to happen and they have this look of horror? So the first person arrives. They were very gracious with me as a young pastor. They sat down. They went through the whole thing. But what I hadn't anticipated is that everyone was arriving at the same time, so now we were getting a bit of a lineup at the front door. And people were getting more and more angsty about waiting to have to take off their socks and shoes and sit down. And it was just so awkward for them. And I realized, I've misjudged this whole thing. This is not going to work. A few women at the back of the line with looks of horror kind of skirted and just slipped into the living room and around to our kitchen just to get a cup of coffee. I still gave them the socks because I thought that was a nice thing to do. But I realized that my intent and heart was to encourage and make this a meaningful moment in leadership together. But because of our cultural context, it was just awkward and strange and just weird. When you read this, I'm not sure how you feel when you read this foot washing account, but that's not what's going on here. It's not weird because they weren't used to washing their feet or having other people wash their feet. It's weird and awkward in this moment because of who is doing the washing. That's what makes this strange. Because in that day and age, there's three main reasons why people would have regular foot washing. Just daily cleansing and washing. It was dirty, dusty, lots of walking going on. The other thing was to get ready for Sabbath, where they'd have ritualistic washing and cleansing so that they could worship in a certain way. And the third way that it was a regular part of their practice was around hospitality. So anyone who was inviting people over for dinner or for a meeting or something like that would at the very least provide water so that their guests could wash their feet. That was the bare minimum you would do as a host. There's a really interesting story in Luke 22 where Jesus is invited over to the house of Simon the Pharisee. If you read that story, here's how it basically goes in the paraphrase Matt version. Jesus is reclining, Simon the Pharisee's house. A woman from the community comes in, and she begins to wash Jesus' feet, and it says that her tears wet his feet. She dried his feet with her hair, and she anoints his feet. And Simon, this religious leader, kind of scolds her and scolds Jesus and said, how can you allow this woman and what she's about, because she had a tough reputation in the community, how can you allow her to touch you? If you knew who she was, you would never allow this. And Jesus pushes back hard on Simon. Says, you are the host of this dinner, and you didn't even offer water so that we could wash our feet. The scolding is because culturally it was very common to wash your feet, but it was required of the host to do, at least to provide the water for the washing. If it was a place that had some means, they might have a household servant who would do the washing. They might have a slave situation. But in the first century context, that idea of washing your feet was very, very familiar. But there was a social hierarchy that was at work here. Someone of a higher status would never, ever, ever consider washing the feet of someone who is below them. You would just never do it. It would just be considered uncouth. It would just be wrong. You wouldn't do it. There's a story in rabbinic literature where a woman wants to express her love to her husband. And so the story goes that she comes to her husband and wants to demonstrate her love for him. And she says, I want to wash your feet as a demonstration of my love. And he stops her from doing it. The husband will not allow his wife to wash his feet because he feels like it demeans her so much. That's the level of hierarchy and structure that's going on and playing itself out here. So when Jesus, the leader, gets up, takes off his outer clothes, gets the basin, gets the water, and begins to work his way around, that's why this is awkward. It's not the washing, it's who is doing the washing. That's what's happening in this section, this foot washing. If you want to talk a bit more about that, we can, but that's what's happening in this section here. Swartley in the Lewisville.Church Bible commentary says this: Jesus therefore chooses to wash his disciples' feet at this time, to begin not only an action, but also a new relationship and community, with love as its distinguishing mark. Let's think about this, a deeper meaning of what's happening. So I want to read this section again from verse 6 to verse 9. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Remember, context is like, why on earth would Jesus be doing this? He's above us. He's our leader. We're following him. Why is he coming around? So it's a very good question for Peter to ask. Are you going to wash my feet? I'm sure he's feeling awkward and embarrassed by it. Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. Right? This is him saying, no, you can't do this. It's like, this is too awkward. It's too embarrassing. It's too shameful. I should have maybe thought to wash your feet, but certainly you can't wash mine. And then Jesus says, unless I wash you, you have no part of me. It's the who is doing the washing. It's who. And at that moment, when Peter recognizes that in some way, connection, relationship with Jesus hinges on this moment, he jumps in. In a way, we always read about Peter, full steam ahead, right? And then he says, well, then not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. Just wash all of me. And Jesus helps teach him in this. This kind of washing is a foreshadowing. There's something deeper that's going on. This is a foreshadowing. In the moment, he's washing their feet. But it's a foreshadowing that in a few short days, there's a different kind of cleansing of washing that's going to be provided by Jesus to clean them once and for all. That through his death on the cross and his resurrection, there is hope and cleaning for everyone for all time. This is a foreshadowing moment of Jesus' kingdom, where the one who has status and privilege in the eyes of our culture reduces himself in an other-centered, self-sacrificial way to pour himself out. This is a small moment. He's washing feet. He's working against cultural norms. It's awkward. It's embarrassing. But on a much larger scale, he's about to give his whole self up as a loving sacrifice. If you want to know what other-centered, self-sacrificial love looks like at its pinnacle expression, Jesus on the cross. Pouring out, emptying himself, giving all that there is, establishing a new kingdom, a new way. Jesus, our Savior, must do for us what we can never do for ourselves. That is, cleanse us from our most intimate and shameful sin. It's only through Jesus. Unless I wash you, you can have no part of me. This foreshadowing, this hinting that if you want to have connection, ongoing relationship, an invitation to the table of Jesus, it only comes through what Jesus does for us. You can't earn your way, make it up, force your way in. It's only through Jesus. And accepting this offer, this sacrifice he gives us. And the last thing, I love how Jesus makes this a teachable moment. So he's gone and done this physical demonstration of washing, of emptying himself out, and then he does kind of like, I feel like it's a parental moment almost. He sits back down, puts on his clothes, sits back down, and then he says in verse 12, do you understand what I have done for you? Right? Isn't that a good kind of almost big brother parent moment? Like, do you see what just happened? Now, do you understand what I've done for you? He's trying to get them to ingest it and understand that it's not just awkward and, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of doing the washing? He's saying, wait, do you understand? And he's trying to get them to think about this relationship and the way he's changing things. He says in verse 15, I have set an example that you should do as I have done for you. No servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. He's like reinforcing, of course those who are below aren't above the one who's in charge. But what it looks like to be in charge and to lead means you flip yourself, the whole thing turns upside down, and servant leadership, other-centered love becomes a marker of the kingdom of Jesus. It's a radical change, and he's modeling it, and we see it in full extent. In Luke's gospel, it's pretty awesome. He has this account where they're in the upper room, his version of the same thing as he's telling the story. And after the meal happens, there's this grumbling that breaks out between the disciples, and they start to argue about who is the greatest. And Jesus rebukes them, because even in that moment, they don't understand that something new is happening in the kingdom of Jesus. It's not about power or position or privilege. You don't fight for leadership. You don't fight for attention. You lay yourself down, as Jesus is modeling, laying yourself down for others. He turns it into a teachable moment. This quote says, washing another's feet signifies at the deepest level a love for the other that is willing to die for the other. Again, remember the foreshadowing that's happening here. We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. So we see Jesus here in this text as a spiritual cleaner, and he gives us this mandate then for humble service. So that's why some branches and traditions of the church have held on to this as one of their ordinances to model this, to lay yourself down, to give yourself up. It's been a part of their ritual. So I've been kind of kicking it around. What is a modern day equivalent of that? You know, besides me trying to do it at my front entranceway as leaders come over. But what really is a modern equivalent? What does that look like? So let me ask you this. Who would you say is the most powerful or influential person in the world right now? Just shout it out. Trump. Donald Trump. We won't comment. We'll just say Donald Trump. Yeah, what else? Taylor Swift. So I put this picture, I also thought of Taylor Swift. I don't know what that says about me, but I thought, you know what, in terms of influence and what's happening culturally and attention and all that, yeah, she's pretty influential. What else? Elon Musk. I didn't think about that one, but I've heard other people say that when it comes to technology, and one of the wealthiest people. I don't know if he's number one or two with Jeff Bezos, but yeah, certainly really influential. What else? Kim. Who? Kim. Who's Kim? I'm missing it. Oh, Kardashians. Now I feel very old. Okay. Okay, yeah. We'll stick in the pop culture vein. Yeah, it's great. What else? Any other thoughts? Oprah. Yes, tons of influence, tons of people tracking and following. You know, if she recommends something, people go for it. Like, here's a few that jumped to mind when I was thinking about a modern equivalent. I thought Joe Biden. Now, not to contrast with Trump, but simply to say if he's in this position as the president of the United States, 330 some odd million people in the country, military superpower, he has definite power and influence regardless of your political leanings. On the world scale, he's one of the most powerful, influential people. Another one I thought of was Pope Francis. There's 1.3 billion people who identify as Catholic in the world. That is a lot of people that if he says something or talks about something are listening and kind of have their ears turned to him. I also put down, as we joked about, Taylor Swift as well. But I was just trying to think of who are those influential, powerful people in our world. So whoever came to mind for you, whether it's one of these or someone else, if you didn't shout it out, just imagine that person shows up one day at your house and says, hey, I'm here to do all your dishes. I'm here to clean your bathroom. I'm going to scrub the shower, get in all the grout marks. I'm going to do everything. You would probably feel so embarrassed, so awkward. It would feel so strange for you that this person that you esteem in a certain way would do this thing that feels so beneath them and so menial. It would just feel like, oh my, like really? Like it would just be brutal, right? Now times that by like 100. So the disciples are not fully aware of what's going on in this moment, but they have made claims of who they believe Jesus to be, as Lord, as the Christ, as the Messiah. So they already had these ideas, but they haven't really figured out how it's all going to work. But even in this moment, they're ashamed and embarrassed by their teacher and leader getting down and doing this. And as the Easter story plays itself out, imagine that the God who calls all things into existence, the Messiah that was long waited, would give everything in order to make a way possible, to submit and give everything up. This upside down nature of leadership, of coming, of Messiah, of establishing the kingdom is not what they anticipated. And Jesus ushers it in and starts hinting at it in a whole different way. To love means to lay yourself down for the other. It's just a fascinating part of the story. I wonder what else was happening in the room when I'm curious about it. Like when Jesus got the towel and the basin begins working away, I would imagine there's some people who thought, oh man, I should have done that. Like I know that's kind of the cultural cue. Why did I not think about it? Kind of missed that one. Or, who else was embarrassed? Did anyone else try to stop them? Like how many feet did Jesus wash before he got to Peter? It must have been quite a scene. As they're mowing down, eating, hanging out, and then Jesus starts doing this. I imagine like this hush that came over the room, and it probably got really awkward real fast. I don't know what comes to mind for you, but here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a few minutes to chat about this, what stands out to you in the story, what grabs your attention, and then we'll pass a few mics around and just talk about this part of the story, about Jesus modeling servant love and servant leadership, okay? I'll watch the clock. I'll call you back together in a few minutes. Go for it. All right, I'm going to call you back, interrupt any conversations going on. I'd love to hear, Stephen and Mark have a couple mics, so just so we can hear each other well, if you have a thought or comment, something you'd like to mention that was standing out to you, something you're curious about, please just throw up your hand. Let's have a bit of a chat. Okay, Carly up here, Stephen, and someone else, throw up your hand so we can be ready for you. Don't be shy. Vern over on this side as well. 2-0. We're playing sides. Let's go, guys. Okay, Colin, there we go. 2-1. Okay, Carly.
So something we were talking about, Carolyn and I, just now is when we think about these modern equivalents of the action that someone would perform for us, we fall short of including physical touch, the kind of act of, even though I'm sure people felt differently about their feet being touched because it was so common, it still was physical and intimate in a way that washing someone's toilet or scrubbing someone's shower wouldn't necessarily be.
Yeah.
So I'm still trying to find, is it the washing of hair or even just coming and being physically held? That makes me feel uncomfortable that someone of esteem would come and want to hold me. Do you know what I mean? Sounds kind of weird in our cultural context where touch is so taboo a lot of the time. Trying to find, include that sense of touch intimacy that would come with the action of washing someone's feet.
Yeah, that's amazing. You're right, because in the examples that I was just tossing out, there's no connection, no physical touch. That's really good. I don't know the answer, but what does that look like for someone to touch and to know you? And because even in this moment, when I think about Jesus working his way around, these are people he spent 3 years with. So I don't know, does he say something while he's doing it? How is he affirming them, mentioning? He's modeling this, but what else is going on? We don't know. But that physical touch, yeah, thanks for mentioning it. That's great. Yeah, Vern.
What I wondered about in verse 7 where Jesus says, you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. I was just thinking, when is that afterward? And I wonder whether it's not till the day of Pentecost when the Holy Spirit comes and there's like when the thing finally clicks, right? And all of these things kind of come together.
Yeah.
That they're not going to get it that night. They're not even going to get it at the crucifixion or the resurrection. It's not until down the road that it finally okay, this is what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of the kingdom starts to come together for them.
Yeah, that's really good. When did they understand? I think you're right. I think there's little lights that slowly go on, but probably not until, that Acts 2 moment where Holy Spirit comes and they're empowered then. Do they probably, and I would imagine like all of us in our discipleship journey, there's probably ongoing moments of realization, of reminder, of recognition of all that Jesus has done. But they don't initially, you're right, they don't initially know what's going on till later. Yeah, it's great. There was someone else, I forget where we were at. Oh, yeah.
So Mancy had come over to my house once, and my driveway had not been shoveled, and he's like, can I shovel your driveway for you? And I just felt that embarrassment come over me. So when you were talking, I was thinking about that moment, and I just wanted to share it.
Right, okay, yeah, like someone doing something for you in that way. Yeah, that's great. Mancy, welcome to Canada. Thanks for shoveling driveways, brother. So good. Anyone else want to jump in? Yeah, up here. Rach? Oh, okay, let's go Mike first while the mic is going around.
Well, there's another level of depth to this, and that is that if he did wash all of the disciples' feet, that means he washed Judas's feet as well. And he knew he was going to betray him, and Judas knew he was going to betray him. So there is a level of servanthood that's being modeled here, but he's actually serving the one who is going to betray him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic. In the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew 5-7, when Jesus outlines a kingdom ethic for the people of God, he talks about other-centered enemy love in a way that we actually don't understand today, especially in our context, of what it means to love the other, even when there's risk of injury or assault or hurt back to you. And in this moment, he knows what Judas is going to do. The steps are starting to, the wheels are starting to turn, and he washes Judas's feet. It doesn't specifically tell us, but he for sure made his way around, and Judas was there. Judas hadn't left the upper room yet to go and kind of get that whole thing going. So yeah, I love that you mentioned that. It's great. And one more. Yeah, please.
So when I was looking at it, the part that kind of stood out to me was when Peter was like, oh, wash my hands and my head as well. And I was trying to kind of understand why Jesus said no to that. And I guess like what I'm thinking, but I don't know for sure, would it almost have brought more honor to Peter if God had, or Jesus had like washed his hands and his head, because it would have been more of a, I don't know, like a whole thing as opposed to just the feet. And what are your, that's kind of what I'm wondering about.
Mm-hmm. Why Jesus says, well, he says if you're clean, once you've had a bath, you only need to clean your feet, he says, right?
Yeah.
A person who has had a bath, verse 10, needs only to wash his feet. His whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you. I think it's another part of the foreshadowing that's happening, that there's going to be an eventual cleansing that comes where you may still do your regular physical cleaning to stay rolling, but a whole different kind of cleaning is coming. And I think it's continued just to foreshadow what is about to happen there. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Okay, let's keep moving here. Thanks everybody for sharing. It's great. I always love having a conversation. I want to show you a picture here of, this is my mom and dad. So this is Alan and Lynn Vincent. And my dad was here back in the fall, I think. So some of you may have met him. And I've shared a little bits here and there about my folks. So maybe 10, 12, 14 years ago, I don't really remember, but we started teasing my mom because she started leaving like sticky notes all around the house. And it was more than just like how to turn on the VCR and get cable working with multiple remotes. And that can be hard for anyone, I guess. But we started seeing them pop up in different ways, different cupboards. You'd open it up and there'd be like sticky notes all over. Or, on the stove, there was one once when we went home for whatever holiday it was. We got home, my brothers and I were like, Mom, like, why on earth would you have that there? Like 10 to boil, 5 to whatever, and 2 to simmer, like just how to work the dials on the stove and what to set it at, and eventually on the coffee machine, and then on the toaster, like push down to toast. Stuff like you're like, how are you missing this? And we realize it's more than just tons of information and she's just forgetting. It's now tipping into like something more is going on. And it took a long while for us to get any type of medical diagnosis for my mom. We just knew something was going on. And then eventually, a number of years later, she was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. And now, when this picture is a fairly recent picture, this is my mom and dad. This is the home my mom is in now. And she doesn't know who I am. She doesn't know my brother. Like, she doesn't know any of us. She kind of, I think, knows my dad a little bit at time to time. It comes in and out. I think most of the times there's some type of a recognition in her. I honestly think she thinks he's like the nice, hot nursing home attendant or something. Like, I'm not trying to call my dad hot. That's really awkward. But I think she thinks there's something special about it, but she doesn't know. And he keeps reminding her, like, oh, I am your husband. We have had kids. And she's shocked by that. You have grandkids, shocked. Now you're a great grandma, Recently, my dad went with some friends. Some of their married couple friends were down in Florida, and they said to my dad, you should just come. You need to come down. So he was away for 3 weeks. He's home now. But I said, when you went and saw Mom for the first time afterwards, did she act like it had been a while since the visit? Or was it like you had just shown up yesterday? He's like, it was as if I just saw her yesterday. Like, there's no concept of time or of people or relationships. And now, if you knew my mom, she was a school teacher in the Toronto District School Board, and she was one of those teachers who was like, everything was like figured out. There was lists. She like ran our house, not in like a tough way, but like in a, well, sometimes tough, but in a very direct, straight way. She managed everything. My dad was often outside of the home doing work and things like that. So my mom was always the one in charge. And on this side of it all, I can look back on the story of my parents and I realize my mom laid down her life for our family all the years growing up for us. That was my mom's role. She worked outside of the home, and then she worked to keep us all organized, and she loved us in an other-centered way by laying down her life for our whole family and to support my dad. The twist of this all is now I'm starting to see my dad struggle and figure out what it means to lay down his life to love my mom in a way that I've never seen him. My dad's not a touchy-feely guy. He's not super emotional. That's not who he is. But on this visit, when I was there in this setting, my dad still comes in and he brings his Bible and he brings an old hymnal. And he reads her scripture every day. He talks to her, and then they sing old hymns. And the amazing thing about old hymns is that my mom can recall lyrics, which is just fascinating how music gets into you and you're able to say it, And I see my dad kind of in a new way. Like, has it been easy? Absolutely not. But my dad is learning to love in a way that I've never seen him love that way before. Maybe he did, I just never witnessed it. But now I'm witnessing a self-sacrificial, other-centered love for my mom that just kind of, it takes me back a little bit when I saw it. It's just a very different thing. And I see that in his life, he is trying to figure out what it means to love others in an other-centered way, to love my mom in that kind of way. And it's kind of moving for me to see that, because that's not who my dad has always been. And he struggles with it. Would he have said this is where retirement and older age are going to go for him? Of course not. No one picks this. But in this, you see the hope and beauty of a love that is not based on things going right. It's based on a depth that only comes because we have first experienced love from Jesus. So when we're at our worst, when we're struggling, the love of Jesus for us, we experience that, and it compels us then to love in a way that our world does not understand, that does not make sense to our culture, to love in another other-centered extension way. In 1 John, as they're trying to explain this kind of love, this is what it says: "My beloved friends, let us continue to love each other, since love comes from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and experiences a relationship with God. The person who refuses to love doesn't know the first thing about God, because God is love. So you can't know him if you don't love. This is how God showed his love for us. God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him." This is the kind of love we're talking about. Not that we once upon a time loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as a sacrifice to clear away our sins and the damage they've done to our relationship with God. And then it continues in verse 19. We, though, are going to love and be loved. First, we were loved. Now we love. He loved us first. If anyone boasts, I love God, and goes right on hating his brother or sister, thinking nothing of it, he's a liar. If he won't love the person he can see, how can he love the God he can't see? The command we have from Christ is blunt. Loving God includes loving people. You've got to love both. So the question is, who is God calling you to love? Who's God inviting you to love? What does that look like for you to extend yourself for the other? You know, the thing about when you probably step back and picture, God, these are the people I really want to love, and then you open your eyes, it's probably not the same kind of people who show up around you. Like, love isn't always easy. Sometimes it is. That's wonderful. But love is difficult at times. It's costly at times. But we love in this other-centered way because we first experienced the love of God. If we haven't had a genuine experience with the love and forgiveness of Jesus, we're not fully able to love people in that way. It's just not possible. This is a whole different kind of love. So what I'd love for you to do as we wrap up, I'd love for you to picture who is God inviting you to love in this kind of way, in a radical way, an other-centered way. What does it look like for you to give yourself in this way? Now, a little disclaimer, I'm not saying love the situation or the person that is going to hurt or harm you to intentionally put yourself into danger. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about, like, who are those people that are in your sphere that Jesus is inviting you to love in this radical way, that a marker of the kingdom of Jesus is our love for each other. They will know us by our love for each other. So close your eyes if you're willing to do this and just picture who Jesus might be inviting you to love. Maybe it's a sibling, a parent, one of your own children, a neighbor, a coworker. I don't know who pops to mind for you. I have no idea. But is there one person or a family or a couple or something that Jesus is inviting you in this moment to consider, what does it mean to love in a way that I just can't do on my own in a human way, but I need God to show up to help me love them in a radical way? So just think about that, and then I'm going to give you a moment to pause, and I'm going to pray for you that you can live out that love in a real tangible way for them over the coming days. So Jesus, we have these pictures, these people, these faces in our minds right now. And I don't know what's in people's minds, my sisters and brothers and friends here. I don't know who is in their mind right now. But Jesus, I believe that by your Spirit, you can spark imagination and ideas for us. And so I just want to affirm that you're bringing us into the right place of thinking these people. And Jesus, your example of giving yourself, of this upside-down kingdom, of ultimately giving your whole self so that we have invitation to experience love and forgiveness and hope. We love because you first loved us. And so teach us what it means as a church to love people in a radical way, in a way that makes our culture and our world scratch its head because it just does not make sense. Jesus, those people that are in our minds right now, give us opportunity to demonstrate love for them. Give us an empowerment that only comes through you in a supernatural, powerful way. Holy Spirit, work through us as a church. Bring courage when it's needed for these conversations or this expression of love. Help us move in this direction to become a more loving church, more loving people because we've experienced your love, Jesus. Sisters and brothers, would you have courage and peace and joy as you experience the love of Jesus and now extend that to others. Amen.